Hello, my name is Dan Turk, and I'm an application engineer with Geometric Solutions. Today, we're going to take a look at exploded views within NX, how to explode them at the assembly level, and then bring that into your drawing. The first thing that I want you to notice is the way I have this drawing set up. So I've got a drawing as my top level, and then just below that is the assembly. If you do your drawings within the same assembly file, the steps will all be the same, so there won't be any change there. To create an explosion, we want to be in the Assemblies tab, then we come over to Exploded Views and New Explosion. It gives us the option for a name. We'll stick with Explosion number 1. From here we can go back to Exploded Views, and now it gives us some extra options. We can edit the explosion. What that means is we can take one part and move it. We can do an auto explode, and what that means is that it'll take the components and it'll move them as they are assembled. We can unexplode, we can delete explosions, and we can change our work field. So we can have multiple exploded views. Let's look at these commands one at a time. The first one we're going to look at is auto explode components. If I choose that, and then I go to my assembly tree, I'm just going to choose all of these bolts. Say OK, and we'll move them a distance of 250. Here you can see that they moved 250 millimeters, but they moved along the axes of the hole that they were constrained to. So the auto explode, it does have some intelligence built into it. It's going to move things based on constraints. Let's see that again. Exploded views, auto explode components. We'll choose these two rings. In this case, negative 250. And we can see how they move, that they're still aligned to the constraints. And that is the auto explode function. Let's take a look at the other tools within exploded views. We'll go back to exploded views, and this time we're going to unexplode a component. So we'll just choose those two rings to start with, and they drop right back into place. Exploded views, unexplode. Go ahead and choose all of those bolts, and OK. The reason that we show this is sometimes when we're exploding, we might go too far or explode too much. And so it gives you that option to bring everything back to 0. Let's next move some parts individually. We'll click Exploded Views, Edit Explosion. The first thing we need to do is choose what parts do we want to move. I'm going to choose these 3 clamps and the 3 bolts that go with it. Next, move objects. And I can see from that little work coordinate that pops up, it's not exactly how I want it. So I'm going to choose Move Handles Only, and just get my handles oriented. Then I'll go back to Move Object, and let me just drag these guys up a bit. And we'll just click OK. Let me do that again. Exploded Views, edit the explosion. This time I'm going to choose just this part. Move Objects. Because I selected just that one part, I don't need to move the handles at all. I'll just bring this up. And OK. To switch from an exploded view to a base view, we just click Exploded Views, and I can go no explosion, and it brings it back to where we were. If I want to get back to this explosion, just going to explosion number 1. Let's go ahead, set this back to no explosion, and then we're going to create a new explosion. We'll just call this one explosion 2. And what we want to show in this particular explosion is just this yellow plate along with the bolts being moved. Exploded views, edit explosion. I'll choose the plate and a couple of these bolts. Let me adjust the handles. And we'll move those out. Maybe in this case I also want to take these bolts and I want to move them out further. So I'll choose Edit Explosion, select the 4 bolts, adjust my handles, and just move those. With the exploded views, we also have the ability to add trace lines. Let's do that now. Exploded views, and all the way to the right, trace lines. We'll just choose one point and the next. The trick with these is you want the arrows to point at the part that it's going inside of. You can see how quickly this works. And I'll just add the last one. So that's how we can add trace lines, and you can see that they are added pretty easily. Let's see if our trace lines, if they stay with the components as we move them. So I'm going to click Edit Explosion. I'm just going to draw a box around all of these parts. We'll go ahead and move them. Just bring that down a little bit more. And OK. And you could see that for a second the trace lines weren't attached, but as soon as we dropped the part down, the trace lines stayed where they were. Let's review what we have. Exploded views. We could go to no explosion. Explosion 1. And explosion 2. For explosion 2, we're going to want to hide the clamp, the parts, and these little bolts. It does give you the option under exploded views to show components or to hide components in the view. And all we'd have to do is select this command and then select the components. But I'm going to show you another way that you can do this that might be a little bit better in drafting. Let's switch back to explosion number 1, and then we'll go over to drafting. We'll click to add a base view. And what's really nice about this is by default we can use the trimetric view, and that's going to have our explosion right on it. So we can just drop that view right down. If I wanted to add a view without the explosion, well, we can see how easy that is. So it's just the trimetric view that has the explosion in it. But we might think, well, what if we don't exactly want this particular view? Well, no problem. We've got the Orient View tool, and we can choose any view that we want. So perhaps that's the view that I'd like. Let's say OK. And there we have it. Just change the scale of that, and we'll put that down. Let's go back to modeling and turn on the other explosion. Assemblies, exploded views. We're going to choose explosion 2. Back to drafting. We'll add our base view. And again, by default, if we choose trimetric, it gives us that exact view that we're looking for. As we said though, there's some components here that we want to hide. So let's do that now. Underneath settings, we have the ability to choose components that we'd like to hide. So I'll just click Select Object. And then we can just start picking the components that we want hidden. Maybe in this case I do want to orient my view just a little bit, so I'll choose that Orient View tool and get that lined up nicely. I'll then click and drop that view right into place. So that's the basics of using exploded views in the assembly and then bringing those into your drawing. I hope it was helpful. Thank you very much for your time.